Hello, everyone. A very good evening to you all. Welcome to Quantum's first Path to Profit. I'm Ghazal Jain and I will be the moderator for this session. As promised, we will be discussing how investors can navigate in these uncertain times when safe debt funds and promising equity funds have taken a beating. We will also try to challenge the basis of your investment decisions and try to lead you out of the current mess. But first things first, all attendees have been muted for the smooth functioning of the session. Audio and video of the three speakers and myself have been enabled. If you have any questions through the webinar, please send them to us through the chat option on the lower half of the screen. And we will try to take 5 to 6 questions at the end. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Our first speaker, Mr. Ajit Dayal, founder of Quantum Advisors, the sponsor and parent of Quantum Mutual Fund, will kick off the path to profit with an overview of the economy and the stock market. He will also be talking about the lack of quality plaguing the Indian mutual fund industry and take us through his personal asset allocation. So over to you, Ajit.
Thank you, Ghazal. Firstly, this is, of course, our first Path to Profit. We started this Path to Profits in 2009, which was actually a few months after the Lehman crisis and the global financial meltdown. So at least this we're starting in a period while we are still in some kind of lockdown and sort of meltdown in some sense in the field of finance too. So thank you very much for joining in. So we come here at a time when, things that our parents told us when we were small, wash your hands, soap, water before, after you eat. We have to remember these basic things to stay healthy. So I hope everyone is healthy and everyone is safe. At the outset, when I kind of look at where the mutual fund industry is, I'd like to first talk about the portfolio. I'd like to end with the portfolio, but give you a sense of where we are. So as many of you all are aware, I'm the founder of Quantum Advisors, which set up Quantum AMC, which is the fund manager for the Quantum Mutual Funds. And I've also helped set up Equity Master, which gives views on independent shares, and also on Personal FN, which talks about mutual funds and gives advice on mutual fund portfolios. So one of the things that we've heard everyone on TV say is that we are in a black swan event. And I think that's a lie. I think in the 26 years that we've had the mutual fund industry in India since 1994, we've had 17 dislocations in financial markets. And of those 17, 4 of them could potentially be called black swan events. So when something happens 17 times out of 26 years, or you have 17 events in 26 years, or even 13 of those are not black swan events, they're more like crows. They become very commonplace. And it's a shame that asset managers and research analysts in our industry, when they're modeling out the future, they're not assuming the things that can happen, which are not black swan. These are things that are man-made. These are things that can destroy or dislocate stock markets based upon what's happening in the economy now. So I would like to sort of caution you whenever you hear that. Black swan, it's not, it's a black crow event. Let's talk a bit about the economy. So economy was, if you look at it from 1980, we've had 11 governments. This government, of course, has finished one full term and started the second term. But the long-term GDP average has been 6.3% per annum. Recently, it's slipped down. So we've changed the way that we calculate GDP. And that change was initiated under the Congress regime, but implemented or came into force while the BJP came into power in the first regime in 2014. May is when the BJP came to power, and by 2015, we had started this new change. So what's in the red is under what we call the new series. And if you want to compare the new series to the old series, you really have to deduct anywhere from 1.5% to 2%. So when you read that we've got a GDP of 5% in India, in actual fact, we have a GDP of 3%. So look, remember that 6.3% long-term number? So Indian economy was already weakened and drifting. And as proof of that, companies had a lot of factory capacity. Demand was slow. And so there was no necessary for them to set up new factories. And if companies don't invest in new factories and create new jobs, that also hurts GDP. So we were already in a poor situation before COVID hit us. COVID was in some sense, the straw that broke the camel's back. And this back and this straw and this camel was already very weak. The one great win of the Modi regime, of the Modi since May 2014, has been the growth and interest in mutual funds. So if you look at this chart on the left side, from 2004, 5, 6, 7, when the brick story was made popular by Goldman Sachs and the world, bought hook, line, sinker, and rod, a lot of domestic investors put money into mutual funds. And at that point too, in my view, the mutual funds were missold, misrepresented to trusting investors whose job it is not to analyze what a fund manager says, but to take it on trust. And when you had the Lehman crisis, see the red in the middle, that was all the redemptions. People lost faith. People no longer trusted the industry. People were scared and they withdrew money. Prime Minister Modi comes to power, May 2014. Look at that fantastic run up that we had, flows from retail investors into the mutual fund industry. That's also highlighted here. The first chunk of yellow numbers is 2005 to 8. That's the brick area. And even over there, you can see the foreign investors were 3 times the size of local flows, which is marked in yellow. So the foreigners were 3 times the size of the local flows. Fast forward to post-Modi, 2014 onwards, the local investors are 3 times the foreign flows. And even as recently as March 2020, just about a month ago, you had local investors buying $4 billion worth of shares in the mutual funds, while foreign investors were selling $8 billion worth of shares, exiting India and the stock market. So that's been a big win. But look at the market. Has the market fallen enough? So this title of this chart was really created to show that in the past, when the market was running up, it was not because of economic activity. It was because prices were going up and there was no earnings to show for it. When GDP is slow or low, then it's unlikely that earnings are going to pick up. So the P ratio of the market was at nearly all-time highs to a few months ago. And now, of course, the market correction, it's still nowhere close to where it was in the last pandemic, SARS, March 2003, and the Lehman crisis, which was September 2008 and lasted till March 2009. So has the market fallen? Yes. Is it a crash? Yes. Is it anything compared to Lehman? No. There's still 20, 30% more to go if you want to compare this to the same Lehman or SARS levels. So should you be buying now or later? We'll come to that in a minute. The other quick slide, we've had interest rates that were coming down. So if you all remember, your FD rates were close to 9%, and now they're like barely 6%. So the only time interest rates rose a bit was during the IL&FS crisis and the run up to that. There was some nervousness that the US may increase interest rates. We had the demonetization in India also. There was nervousness about what was going to happen. So interest rates went up. At the time of the IL&FS bankruptcy, it again started falling after that as the government put more money into the system. And despite that IL&FS crisis, what happened was that there was a massive run up in terms of asset gathering by the industry. So if you were to look at the industry and the flows, we had 20,000 crores of AUM in credit funds in 2014. It went as high as over 80,000 crores. Lehman was a crisis, IL&FS bankruptcy was a crisis. So the mutual funds began unwinding, but not fast enough. Prior to this recent Franklin Templeton blowout and the other funds that are in distress, you had about 60,000 crores still in this asset class. Quality took a backseat. Pankaj will talk more about what happened in the debt side. But when you hear a CEO of an AMC, or when you hear people from Amphi say it's a Franklin problem, that is not true. If you look at this, AAA is meant to be high quality. Look at the percentage of AAA in a credit book. It's nothing. They've got more risky products and they've got more risky credits in their books. And again, so it's not a Franklin problem. Returns have been pathetic. Obviously, we're all suffering and seeing from there. But you have to recognize that the moderate risk that these people had was not really moderate. The risk was much higher, but not categorized well and not disclosed well, in my opinion. So again, mis-selling, as I mentioned, it happened 2005, 6, 7. It's happened for a long time. because SEBI had until recently a very opaque system of distribution fees, and investors were moved from fund A to fund B to fund C by distributors largely based on commissions. And that was the rule, that was a chance for mis-selling. SEBI has cleaned up the industry, has forced a lot of disclosure. That has been very good. But the field of finance everywhere in the world, including India, has this problem. If you can try to take money from your client and the client doesn't know about it, all the more better, we'll find a way to do it. So be very careful about that. Risk and leverage, again, despite the risk that they took, they added on extra risk. Rather than reducing risk, they borrowed from the market so they could buy more risky instruments. That was insane. And that's why, again, there's this suffering in the market. If you look at all the quantum funds that we have we've got very few products. Gold on the top has done very well with the 22% return. This is year to date from January 1, 2020 till April end 2020. And if you look at the dynamic bond fund, which Pankaj will also talk a bit about, that's up 5%. Look at the liquid fund is up 1.5%, and look at the equity funds. They've not done too well. They've been minus 20 for the long-term value. We're going to have a special seminar just on the value fund next week. It will be announced shortly. And even the equity fund of funds down 17% in line with the market. And the multi-asset fund, which Chirag will talk about, which you should compare with all the balanced funds out there and all the multi-asset funds in the market. This one has maintained your capital, has not eroded your capital, unlike other fund houses, balanced and multi-asset funds that are. A very simple formula that I've used for my personal life, and I encourage you all to do that, is I use it in two ways. So if I'm spending roughly ₹1 lakh a month, then I kind of ensure that I keep 12 lakhs in a safe place, right? Actually, my number is close to 24 to 36 lakhs. So 24 months to 36 months of my expenditures I keep in a safe place. And I'm giving examples. It can be whatever your numbers are. So I keep 12 months money aside. 3 months of that is in a bank account, easy to access. And 9 months I put between the liquid fund, which is very safe, and the multi-asset fund. If you have a 3-year view on it, it's a very safe place to be. Your capital gets eroded, as we've seen even in downturns like this. The rest of the money, I will put 80% in equity funds and 20% in gold. So I'm happy to talk about this more in the Q&A, but this portfolio, in my view, has been Lehman-proof, it's been COVID-proof, and it's allowed me to maintain my lifestyle without worrying about the impact of dislocations, not black swans, but all the black crows that keep on hitting us. So with that, I'll end my talk and go back to Ghazal. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ajit. We now recognize that COVID-19 is not a black swan event. In fact, there has been evidence of the Indian economy straying from its long-term trajectory over a few years, but the Modi government has kept confidence up, and that's why we're seeing inflows from domestic investors still pretty strong. Also, the build-up in risks that we have been seeing in the debt funds is a result of interest rates declining over the last few years, which led fund managers to compensate for that in order to generate higher returns and gather more AUM. They took on more risks than they were supposed to. And lastly, from Ajit's personal asset allocation, our learning is definitely that whether it's this crisis or the next, the first step is always to keep some money aside in a liquid fund or bank deposits, whatever suits you. And then the next step, whatever money is remaining, needs to be divided and diversified into equities and gold. Thanks, Ajit. Now, next up is Mr. Pankaj Pathak, Fund Manager of Quantum Liquid Fund and Quantum Dynamic Bond Fund. He will be talking about the deep underlying weaknesses in the Indian debt markets and how debt fund investors can navigate the current credit risk funds fiasco. So over to you, Pankaj.
Thanks, Ghazal, and thank you all the participants for joining in. So debt funds have been making a lot of headlines in last 1.5 years, and mostly for bad reasons. Now, people are actually worried about their debt exposure, and most importantly, they are more worried how to select a right debt fund. So in this presentation, I'll just try to answer this question, and also like to advise how Quantum can help you navigate through this crisis and remain unscathed. So first step in selecting a debt fund is to look at the risk and what are the main risks what debt funds are exposed to. So there are broadly three major risks what debt funds take: interest rate, credit, and liquidity risk. So interest rate risk is reflected in the daily volatility of your NAV. If you look at the NAV of a long duration debt fund or a gilt fund, you find the NAV fluctuating a lot more than uh, what you see on the liquid fund. So that's because these funds buy very long maturity bonds, which are more sensitive to interest rate changes. So when interest rates move up, the price of bond that goes down, and that affect the NAV negatively. So that's the interest rate risk. When interest rates move up, your long duration bond fund can take a hit. Uh, Credit risk is a risk of default or a rating downgrade of a issuer, bond issuer. So whenever issuer uh, fails to pay that interest or the principal amount on time, investors have to take loss on that. So that's a credit risk, and we have seen this happening in last 1.5 years, and even before that in many funds. Liquidity risk is risk of not being able to sell whenever required. And what Franklin has quoted as why they wind down their funds. Liquidity risk is directly linked to credit profile of a issuer. So if you look at the good quality bonds like a government bond, almost everybody has approval to buy these bonds, and that's why you find a lot of trade happening in government securities. So it's easier to sell whenever you need it. But on the contrary, in the lower rated corporate debt, uh, there are only a handful of people, mostly institutional investors, trade in those securities. So, and even they step away when things get uncertain. So many times it becomes extremely challenging to sell, even to meet your redemption. So that's why we see all these big borrowing numbers in many of the debt funds. uh, but from investors point of view, I think we need to be very careful about the credit and the liquidity risk in the debt fund. Reason being, in case of interest rate risk, as we all know, that interest rates move in cycles. So you always have a chance that uh, returns will normalize over a period. So if you wait for uh, longer period, uh, your returns tend to normalize. But in case of credit risk or the liquidity risk, when you're not able to sell or the company has defaulted, that's direct hit on your principal amount. That's a write-off of your principal. So, especially in case of debt funds, I think investors should focus more on return of their capital than return on their capital. So, in that sense, I think credit risk is kind of dangerous and can have a permanent damage to your portfolio. Now, coming back to how we can select a right debt fund. So, as I mentioned, that first step should be to look at the risk, and risk is directly linked to your objective. So if you're looking for to deploy a short-term surplus cash, or maybe your kids college fees which is due in few months, or your emergency fund which you may need anytime. So these are the corpus which are not meant to take any aggressive risk and not meant to maximize return, right? uh, Liquid fund could be a very good product for these kind of goals. And but you need to be very selective what kind of risk it is taking. Even for longer term goal, to have a long term goal, but you're not comfortable with the sharp ups and downs in the equities, or you just want to diversify out of equities, maybe you can look at debt fund, but that do carry slightly higher risk, even on the interest rate side. Uh, Now, uh, the second step should be you have to determine what is your risk tolerance, what kind of risk you can take in both the cases. Uh, you have to be very clear what kind of risk the fund is taking and what kind of risk or in what quantum you can tolerate. So that can actually determine which fund you should select and how you should go about allocation. Uh, Now, with that in mind, especially as I mentioned earlier, that you need to be very careful about the credit risk, because in case of interest rate, you still have chance to recover, but credit is a permanent damage to the portfolio. So be careful about that, whether you can tolerate that risk, you have appetite to digest that, because impact could be severe. We have seen it in the past slides, what Ajit has shown. We have seen some of the funds showing negative return to the extent of 30% or the 70%. So are we prepared to take this kind of negative return in debt fund? It becomes extremely challenging because there's disproportionate risk return profile of the credit funds. So the next step should be to look at the underlying portfolio, because for credit risk, you may not get the sense of level of credit risk or the liquidity risk from any measure based on NAV. You have to look at the underlying portfolio and then determine whether the portfolio is in sync with your objective. If you're investing in a liquid fund, you have to find out whether this fund is taking very aggressive credit or liquidity risk, because the objective is to keep your money safe and liquid. You cannot play with your kids' college fees, right? So you have to determine whether, find out whether the portfolio is in sync with the objective or not. In case of Quantum, as I mentioned, our focus has been to be conservative in our liquid fund. This corpus, what comes into liquid fund, is not meant to take aggressive risk, and that's the reason we avoid taking any private credit risk altogether. We do not invest in any private corporate fund. Invest only in government securities and PSUs, which are actually backed by government. So by that way, we try to keep credit risk to minimal levels, and the fund follows a very robust ALM profile, ALM asset liability management, to meet any near-term liquidity requirement. So in the portfolio comparison in this table, you can see that Quantum Liquid Fund has close to 67% investment in government securities, 23% in PSUs, and is holding close to 10% cash in the fund. So, and compared to industry or the top 5 liquid funds, they have on an average close to 50% in private corporates, 25% in PSUs, and the most worrying part is actually the cash. They are running negative cash balance, means they have to borrow to meet redemption. So this is one thing I think, in my opinion, investors should question. The liquid fund by its nature should be extremely liquid. They can anytime sell the securities and meet redemption. Why they need to borrow to meet redemption? That's one thing investors need to question. Again, there is a perception that you can lower the risk by going into big brand names or big AMCs or the big AUM sizes. But I think it's a myth. You have to look at the underlying portfolio. Only underlying portfolio can tell you what kind of risk the fund is taking. It has nothing to do with the size or the brand name. So these has remained the same, that do not invest in liquid fund to maximize return. The aim of that money is to keep it safe and liquid. So we follow that principle in Quantum Liquid Fund. We prioritize safety and liquidity over returns, and try to earn a sensible return by focusing on safety and liquidity. Similarly, for longer term goals, or if you're not comfortable with the equity volatility and want to diversify, you have to look at the portfolio and see whether it's fulfilling the objective. So this is a model portfolio I have presented here. It has 60% allocation to equities, 10% to gold, and to fixed income, all the debt instruments. Now, when times are not good, equities usually tend to fall, and we have seen that in last 1 year when equities are down by 13%, and gold as a hedge against any shock, we have it lived up to its name and delivered a phenomenal 47% jump. So kind of some part of your decline in equity portfolio is protected because of jump in gold. But in case of debt or the fixed income, we find a huge divergence between various fund categories. So I have presented 2 categories here. One, credit risk fund as a category has posted -6% return, but most of the affected funds are actually even much lower, -20, -30, even -70%. So if you get tapped, that means it can compound the problem rather than giving you diversification benefit. On the contrary, Quantum Dynamic Bond Fund has posted a 14% return, because see, investors need to remember to understand that credit markets usually move in tandem with equities and the economy. When economy is not doing good, many of the companies at brink or the lower rated corporates, they face a huge challenge in rolling over their debt or raising money from the market, and that create a lot of pressure on the credit funds or the credit bonds. Whereas on the other hand, government securities and the good quality papers, they tend to gain when economy is not good, because that time RBI tried to stimulate the economy and cut rate and infuse liquidity. That actually helps government bonds. So in this case, if credit is directly linked to equities, it's very hard to imagine how we can get diversification benefit by investing into credit in the fixed income allocation. And this we have seen in case of hybrid funds. Many of the hybrid funds, they had to take a huge write-off in their debt exposure in the recent past. So on one hand, your equities are down. You sold these hybrid funds to telling that we have fixed income which will act as a buffer, but when it was needed to act as a buffer, your fixed income allocation is actually posting much lower return or giving you much negative impact on the portfolio. So we need to be very careful whether it's fulfilling the objective or not. So just to summarize, first thing, look at the risk, look at your objective and your risk tolerance. That's the most important part. What risk you can take and what risk you just can't afford to take. So be very clear about this part. I think if you follow this principle and stick to the quality portfolio, you can easily navigate through all these crises. Thank you. I think, Ghazal, you can.
Sure, Pankaj, thank you so much. Thank you for making us challenge the basis of our debt fund investments. We now know that we have to be fully aware of the risks we are willing to take when we pick our debt funds, particularly credit risk, which has the potential to cause permanent damage to our portfolios. One way or a good gauge to find credit risk is the debt fund category that you're investing in, and also the portfolio's underlying holdings. And lastly, our takeaway is that a larger AUM or a larger AMC will not guarantee that safety that you're looking for. So moving on, a 60-30-10 allocation to equities, fixed income and gold that was put forth by Pankaj is a likely allocation for a DIY or do-it-yourself investor. But if an investor or individual is not comfortable or confident in building his own allocation, our next and final speaker, Mr. Chirag Mehta, who's the fund manager of the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund and Quantum Goal Saving Fund, has a solution for them. So Chirag, I request you to throw some light on your investment philosophy that shines out from the crowd as you judiciously invest in stock markets, debt, and gold.
Thank you, Ghazal. Good evening, everyone. So if you see, the key to look at markets is because markets tend to be extremely volatile, will have different phases of optimism and pessimism going through. And therefore, one has to navigate in this because you cannot predict which is the next best asset class to be in. And therefore, a sensible approach is to have a mix of assets in your portfolio. For example, if you go back to the last crisis that we had, during 2008, equities fell by 52%. So if you had a large chunk of your allocation in equities, you would have seen the corpus fall by half. And in the next year, when equities bounced back by 83%, if you didn't have any equity allocation, you missed the bus. So a sensible approach will always be to have a diversified basket of assets. Like Pankaj pointed out in this crisis, gold is the one that's shining brightly with a return of 47% over last 1 year. So have a mix of assets because each asset in your portfolio has a role to play when you build the portfolio. Like I said, as each asset class has a role to play. For example, fixed income is for regular income and stability to the portfolio. Gold acts like a diversifier and useful against macro events and acts as a store of value. So be it inflationary times or times of stress, gold is a very useful asset, like it is proven in this COVID crisis. Equity are long-term return generators. It gives your wealth a boost over the long term. But again, you need to be cognizant of the fact that it will have its own volatility. Always remember, an asset will always have a risk and a return associated with it. Don't look at returns. There is a risk element to the returns that you generate in each of the asset classes. This is very, very simple and very, it acts like an eye opener to you. If you had a pure equity portfolio over a long period from 2004 till 2020, your returns would have been like 10.7% CAGR from equity investments or equity portfolio. Had you included debt in the portfolio, what happens is your return diminishes a bit, but at the same time, your risk also reduces. So from an annual standard deviation of 22%, you come to 14%, or the maximum fall that you would have seen from peak to trough falls from 56% to 38%. And now if you include an element of gold in that portfolio, you earn a slightly better return, slightly lower than equities, but better than an equity and debt combination. But at the same time, if you see, your risk reduces significantly. All that you saw only being in equities of 56% during 2008, that comes down to 21%. So you minimize the fall, minimize the risk significantly. And therefore, to have an allocation of all three asset classes together is a win-win combination for you. Always when you're trying to pick, say a fund which is diversifying into asset classes, always make sure that it is unbiased. As he pointed out, that there are many balanced funds that lost heavily. That is because their biasness towards equities. They have a minimum 65% allocation to equities, and that's not balanced, right? A balanced fund has to be balanced between risk and return into different asset classes that provide that risk return characteristics, or a mix of portfolio that you can build, right? If you have a biased portfolio, like a 65% allocation, you might well be in the pure equity fund and not in a balanced fund, right? So have a diversified basket which is not biased, like what we do in the quantum multi-asset fund. Equity and debt both are 25 and 65% allocation, and a gold element, which is a kind of sort of a diversifier and a useful asset in times of stress, is a 10 to 20% range. So have a mix of assets that's not biased. That is what you have to see when you are picking a fund which is diversifying assets into three asset classes. And therefore, an element of gold is very, very important when you have such kind of combination. This is what we have done. Like in the previous slide, we saw that our equity allocation ranged from 25 to 65. The fund was launched, the multi-asset fund was launched in 2012. And if you see, since that time frame, equities were expensive and kept running expensive, or kept becoming expensive over a period of time. And so what we have done, we have never utilized the entire range of our equity allocation. We just went to up to 50%, 45 to 50% allocation at a maximum because markets were not conducive. And as equity markets continue to rally, we have significantly reduced our equity allocation. So before the COVID crisis hit us, our equity allocation had probably fallen to the lowest range. We were at 27% allocation to equities at that time in February. March, there was a steep fall that we saw because of COVID. And we bought into that fall because markets became cheaper at that time. Like from trading at 28, 30 times PE, it came to the average PE level of 15 times or 18 times. And therefore, we bought into that fall. And that is why, if you've seen, we have utilized the recovery that we have seen in equity markets, and that helped us recover faster. So wherever there is a risk, we will refrain from taking that risk. Whenever equity markets are expensive, we will not be in that asset class at that point in time, and try to protect the hard-earned money that you have invested with us. So if you see the multi-asset fund returns, and were you to compare with equities or balanced funds, they have done significantly better, right? So if you see last 1 year, our returns are positive, whereas equities, if you see, are trailing negative. Most of the balanced funds are also negative in this time period. So what we have done is try to refrain from taking that risk, and therefore try and protect the capital that you have entrusted us with. Over a longer time, and the rates of return are pretty much comparable. For example, over since inception basis or for a 7-year perspective, the fund has done significantly better as compared to the risk that it has been taking. So most of the people have a lot of money parked in fixed deposits, right? So if you have a fixed deposit, many people went in search for yields when fixed deposit rates started dipping down, right? In 2017, 2018, when fixed deposits were on a downturn, many people in search of yields went into asset allocation funds, balanced funds. But what happened? Those balanced funds were indeed risky, and therefore they fail to protect your capital in times of risk like this, right? Whereas if you see the multi-asset fund, still over a long-term period has given an annualized return of 8.7%, and the smaller risk that you are willing to take to get that better return is also there, because the standard deviation or the fluctuation in values is just less than 6%. Over a 3-year rolling period, if you see, most of the time, quantum multi-asset fund had a better return. Only 15% of the time you would have been disappointed not being in an FD, but being in a quantum multi-asset fund. Therefore, at most times, it has, on a 3-year rolling basis, it has generated better returns than a fixed deposit. So what I will appeal to everyone is diversify across asset class, reduce dependency on a single asset class to generate returns. Need not time the markets. There are fund managers who understand and use principles that help them to increase or lower the allocation and therefore reduce the risk for you. We rebalance the portfolio. And also from a tax perspective, when we change allocations, we don't pay any taxes because we are, as mutual funds are pass-through vehicles. When you do it on your own, you end up paying taxes. And therefore, this is a more tax-efficient option for you. So balanced allocation always works. And that is a way you build your long-term wealth. It has to be non-biased allocations, research-backed, systematic, and process-driven. So if you think that you cannot do it on your own, here the quantum multi-asset fund is a single solution to your basic need of investing. So if you want to build a portfolio and don't know how to do it, then quantum multi-asset fund is a simple solution, just one asset and you are through. Coming to different asset classes that we spoke to, right? When we talked about FDs and people moving out of FDs in search of yields, I think moving out of FDs was the right thing to do, because FDs in general have been a losing proposition for Indian investors. If you see the cost of living, your basket of consumption has been increasing from 23,000 rupees to more than 4 lakh rupees over a period of 30 years, which is a 10.1% increase on an annualized basis. FDs post-tax would have given you just about 5.8. And that really shows you that it's been a losing proposition for you. Had you been in gold, gold is very much close to your cost of living basket, increasing by 9.1% per year. So it has helped. So gold acts as a store of value and it more or less has helped you do that. Equities has done much better in terms of increasing your standard of living, increasing your wealth, much more than the inflation increase. And therefore it has helped you. But be cognizant of the fact that it has its own ups and downs, right? It has its own volatility. And that is why you need elements like debt funds or be it gold in your portfolio to protect in those times. So gold, we think it is for eternity, for today. Be it any time period, it will act as a store of value and effective diversify for your portfolio, and therefore have gold in your portfolio at all times. The main reason why you buy gold is if you see most currencies, because central banks continue to print currencies, they tend to lose value. Look at the red line. Red line in the chart is the INR. And INR has fallen significantly over a period of time. Any currency, take any currency, US dollar, yen, INR, all have depreciated by about 98, 99% vis-a-vis gold. So currencies continue to depreciate, and gold is an element that helps you protect from that currency devaluation. Current crisis is a significant crisis, but we have seen such crises come and go. As Ajit explained, these are black crows and not black swans. What do governments and central banks do? They continue to print more currency during such times. And this time they have gone significantly into it. In terms of something, we have to go 100 years back to see something like that happen. And central banks continue to print currencies. So what central bank printing currencies does, it does tend to protect financial markets, right? If you see, the white line is the US stock market, the S&P 500, and the red line in the chart is the Fed balance sheet. If you see, the stock markets and Fed balance sheet has moved lock in step over a period of time since the global financial crisis. And this really tells you that central banks are doing nothing but trying to support financial markets. And therefore, there will be an end game to when this will come to an end. But given that they have unlimited amount of currencies that they can print, there is something that you need in your portfolio that they cannot print at will, and that is gold. Gold, if you see, people think that gold doesn't give returns, but if you see returns over a large period of time, like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it has given returns in line with what equities have given you, or slightly lower. But this is not the reason why you buy gold. If you see on the left side of the chart, whenever Sensex falls, gold has tended to protect value, and therefore it is a useful diversifier to have in the portfolio. So if you see, like, if you want to invest in gold, the gold saving fund is a great option for you. If you see, it has returns in line with gold, and it helps you diversify your portfolio. So as I said, always try to diversify into asset classes. There is no portfolio. There is risk and reward. Always remember, a sensible approach is to have incorporation of different asset classes in your portfolio. Allocation to gold is a must, and rebalancing your portfolio always makes sense. So if you believe in this, then Quantum Multi-Asset Fund could be one-stop solution for you. Thank you, Ghazal. Over to you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chirag, for sharing with us that given how uncertain and fast evolving the macroeconomic situation is these days, it is futile for retail investors to try and predict the future direction of financial markets or which is going to be the next best performing asset class. Instead, it is prudent and advisable to invest in a fund that is research-backed, dynamically managed, and well-diversified, like the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund, which not only invests in equities and fixed income, but also India's favorite, gold. This brings us to the next part, where our fund managers and Ajit will be taking questions. So the first question is for you, Ajit.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please guide a 30-year-old who has given no thought as yet to start an emergency fund or start investing in mutual funds to build a corpus, if he can spare rupees 15,000 a month? The aim is to feel reasonably comfortable by the age of 50, when most family commitments like education and marriage of children are coming up.
So I'm glad that the person who's 30 years old is thinking long-term, because I did think long-term, but not that long-term anyway. But I think the most important thing, I think Chirag is handing the slides. So on slide number 18, when I talk about my personal life and what I've done, if you could move to that, I know that can be shared on the screen. So I think that's, to me, the most powerful slide for my personal life about how to kind of plan your future, and, you know, irrespective of whatever happens in the world, you are sort of COVID-free and you're SARS-free and everything else free from a financial aspect. And I think that's something important. Right now, all of us are facing multiple pressures at home. You know, you're working at home, you're staying at home a lot longer than you normally would be at home. There's all that home dynamics going on. And yet many people are worried about whether they'll actually have a job when this whole thing ends or when we restart. What kind of salary will they get? Typically in the month of April, you get your increment for the year. So people are not even sure if they'll get their salary, forget about the increment. So one thing I've done in my corporate life in quantum, and one thing I've done in my personal life, is to build buffers. And the best buffer, like I said, is to have that reserve of money, whatever comforts you. So if you're saving 15,000 rupees a month, and let's for argument's sake say that your total expenditure is about 50,000 rupees. So I would say the first thing you should do is to put some money aside every year towards that, building that buffer. And in the initial years, because you got a longer longer lifespan, I would put more money to that buffer. So let's say you've got 15,000 rupees that you're saving every month. I would put 10,000 rupees a month towards building a corpus, which lets me initially go for 3 years, over 3 months, and 6 months, and 9 months, and 12 months. So let's say you keep on doing that. So you put 10,000 rupees a month, and you want to get towards, say, 6 lakhs. And you keep on doing that then for 60 months, effectively. So for 5 years. And once you build that buffer, then you can switch over to being 80-20. Then out of your 15,000 rupees savings, put 80% in equity and put 20% in gold. What I've done with my personal life, and I know there are some questions on this, I put a lot of my equity allocation into the long-term equity value fund. Because I'm a value investor by nature, I understand that markets can go all over the place, and understand that there are points in time when markets get ecstatic, and a value fund manager may not be able to match that. And I hope that when markets come down, the value fund manager will not go down as sharply as the market or as the peer. They'll prepare and they'll kind of prevent my capital erosion or minimize it. So I'm a value investor. So in my 80% bucket, and that goes for the person who's trying to invest, you should have more money in other fund houses, right? We all want to get to nirvana. So Quantum has given you one way to get to nirvana, through the value fund. And by having the equity fund of funds, we've got a basket, which is the best funds from the other fund houses. You put them together. And for every 100 rupees that you put into the Quantum equity fund of funds, besides, I think, the 0.25% expense ratio, whatever it is, 99.75 rupees is being fanned out to other 6 fund houses. So it's not managed by Quantum. The selection of which of those funds is managed by Quantum. So going back to the question of the 15,000 rupees, for the next few years, 10,000 rupees a month to a safe basket, your savings bank account, the Quantum liquid fund, the Quantum multi-asset fund. That's what I do. And then the 5,000 rupees, 80-20 in the Quantum equity fund of funds, and in the Quantum long-term value fund. And then the other 20% in gold. So 1,000 rupees in gold, 4,000 rupees in equity. The equity breakup, 90% in Quantum equity fund of funds, and 10%, 400 rupees in the Quantum long-term value fund. That gives you all your equity diversification that you need if you want to build your own portfolio. So it's good that you're thinking early, and well done for that. But everything happens in steps and stages.
Thank you, Ajit. The next question is for Pankaj. After the problem of debt funds in Franklin, is it safe to invest in debt funds for the short term and long term? Are debt funds getting riskier than equities?
So, I think debt mutual funds will remain a very good alternative for any conventional fixed income instrument. A good quality portfolio that continue to deliver a reasonable return with adequate liquidity. But we need to acknowledge that not all the debt funds are same. So you have to, as I referred in my presentation, that you need to look at the underlying portfolio and determine whether you are ready to take that risk. So it all depends on the underlying portfolio, how much risk you are taking. There could be funds which are maybe riskier than equity in terms of return. We have seen some of the funds doing that. So be careful about that. Especially, I would caution against any kind of credit risk. Credit risk is like driving a car. If you are driving at 30, you met an accident and maybe you get some scratches and you are fine. But if you're driving at 150, it can be really dangerous. It can cause severe damage, right? So you feel it at very bad time. So you don't get the credit risk on day-to-day NAV, as in case of interest rate risk, where you see fluctuation in NAV and you know this is risk. But I think that's the wrong measure of risk. You have to look at the possibility of default or writing off your principal. So first, put your always prefer return of capital and then look for return on capital. So that should be the goal when you select a debt fund. But again, that entire debt category, I think it is still remain a very good alternative for any conventional fixed income instrument.
Thanks, Ajit. Thanks, Pankaj. We'll be taking the next question. This one is for Chirag. Chirag, is it a good time to invest in gold funds given the recent run-up that has happened? And can you explain the difference between a gold savings fund and the gold fund?
Yeah, more than the price, it's very important to have an allocation to gold, because we don't know where the markets will behave, and therefore gold, which is most useful in times of stress, be it inflationary or market volatility, would always help your portfolio. And therefore, if you don't have any allocation to gold, I will recommend that you build your 50% allocation today, and maybe 50% over the next 6-12 months you can buy into the market and average your prices. But it's very important to have an allocation to gold. Having said that, if you see the market dynamics or the factors that are in place for gold, I think they are very, very constructive today. Central banks have been decreasing the rates. That's one of the drivers that helps gold, real interest rates going down. And they have been printing more money, which is debasement of currencies. And therefore, an allocation to gold during such times will always be useful. So I will recommend that you allocate to gold, but depending on what kind of allocation you have today, that will determine how you buy into that market. Secondly, what is the difference between gold ETF and a gold saving fund? Gold ETF is an exchange traded fund which is listed on an exchange. Gold ETF buys physical gold, and based on the current gold prices, the prices of that ETF trade on that exchange. So the prices on the exchange reflect the underlying gold prices that are at that point in time. Gold saving fund is a wrapper around the gold ETF. Gold saving fund invests in the gold ETF. It buys the gold ETF from the exchange. So instead of you buying it from the exchange, there is a fund manager who can buy that for you. And therefore, you can just write a check like you invest in any other mutual fund, and you buy the gold saving fund. So you could do SIPs, which is not possible in a gold ETF, in a gold saving fund. And if you're not comfortable buying or trading on an exchange platform, you can buy to the gold savings fund. So that's the predominant difference. But otherwise, from a return perspective, more or less, both will show you the same return.
Thank you, Chirag. The next question is for you, Pankaj.
So can I just jump over?
Yeah, sure, Ajit.
Sorry, actually, because on gold, because I see a lot of questions on gold on the chat group, and some have asked me what my responses are to the Berkshire Hathaway AGM, and Charlie Munger says don't buy gold. Yeah, if you look at what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have been saying for decades, is that what is gold? You spend your time and effort digging it from some hole, you pick it up, and then you take it to another place and you dig a hole and you put it down. So what does gold do? So I've always argued that neither Charlie Munger nor Warren Buffett have lived in a developing country, have experienced a massive shock to existence. So if you look at George Soros, or you look at our own lives, we have lived in an environment where there's been significant threats to existence, right? Whether it was partition, whether it was World War II in Europe, which hardly affected America because it's an island country. So they've never seen dislocation. You ask anyone from Latin America, you ask anyone from Asia, you ask anyone from Europe and from Africa. They have seen and experienced dislocation. And when they experience dislocation, guess what is the most valuable currency? It's what you have in your teeth, it's what you have on your neck, it's what you have on your hands and fingers, and your it's your gold that you wear. That becomes the currency. Now, they've been so lucky that they've lived in this wonderful country, America, where even if something was wrong, America as a whole has not really suffered per se, right? They didn't suffer in World War II as a continent. The only attack on American soil, in American main continental soil, has been 9/11 in 2001 September. They've not had any attack on American continental soil. They've had American attack on air bases outside of continental US. So their view of gold, I appreciate it, is different from our view of gold. And Chirag is seeing that slide which you're seeing now. The US dollar on April 15th, 1971, President Nixon took it off the gold standard. The US dollar was about $33 per ounce in 1971. So I give you a choice. Would you rather have $33 with you of 1971 till today, or would you rather have had that 1 ounce of gold? That 1 ounce of gold today is $1,700. And forget the fact that the Indian rupee was about 6 rupees to a dollar in 1971 and is today 76 rupees to a dollar. Now you do the math on that, right? And Chirag has shown it on the slide. I mean, all currencies, including the US dollar, have lost 95% plus of their value against what the dollar was in 1971. And even if you take, what if you say that $33 that I had in August 15th, 1971, what if I put that dollar into a US government bond and I earned on average 4% per annum? Even then it works out to $500, assuming that you bought the right bond and no government went bust. It works out to $500. That's still less than a third of what that 1 ounce of gold is worth. So I have two fundamental differences with Berkshire Hathaway, and that's why I don't actually hear their AGMs anymore. Though I really, really respect what they say and do. So one is on gold, and the other is on value investing versus values investing. So I was a huge fan of them and still am, not that huge anymore. In 2008 and until 2008, all of you all who do follow Buffett and Munger, in every report, they spoke about the toxic world of derivatives. And the largest issuer, one of the top 3 issuers in the world of derivatives, was Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and that crew. And yet in 2008, because there was a good rate of interest that was coming from a Goldman coupon of 8% investment and an option to convert to stock, Berkshire Hathaway invested in Goldman. And to me, Goldman should have gone bust. And Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger rescued the company, which they criticized for decades as in terms of the financial industry for doing wrong things. So I said, okay, it's about a rate of return. We're not about rate of return only. We're value and values investing. We're both in that sense, which is why we have an ESG fund launched recently. And we've always had a governance screen in the long-term value fund. We do not own shares of Reliance or Jindal or Vedanta or SR for decades because they failed to meet our governance standards. There's got to be some values also. Long-term fund shortly next week we announce it by the weekend. I know there have been many questions on that too. I even wrote an honest truth on that about the poor performance of the long-term value fund. So I wrote, value has failed, the quantum has succeeded, because we gave you the equity fund of funds, and if you had the ratio of 90-10 or 85-15, you'd been absolutely fine. But yes, we owe you an explanation, and that will come next week on why the value fund has not done quite what we wished it to do in the last 60 months. Thank you.
Thanks, Ajit. So moving on to your question, Pankaj, will Franklin be able to pay the capital back to their investors? And what is the risk in 5-star funds which have all AAA or AAA people?
It's difficult to comment on any other fund, whether they'll be able to repay or not. But in general sense, if in the current framework, in the current environment, where many of the companies have lost a huge chunk of their use more, because even if this lockdown is lifted, I think it will be partial. So in that case, it would be hard for them to actually make all the repayments. So in general sense, credit quality or the credit market is going into extreme stress even from here. So what we have seen till now, it's not over yet. we are going to see more pain in the credit market. So with that in mind, it seems very difficult that anybody in a lower rated corporate debt market can recover their full amount. So it seems difficult as of now.
And there's a follow-up question, Pankaj. What if private corporate is in AAA? Would you buy it?
Even for the PSUs, many of the AAA PSUs we don't buy. So private is very far-fetched. So we in both our funds we stick only to government securities and PSUs, which are supported by government. Even in the PSUs, we are very selective. We look at the PSUs balances independent of the government. So then only we select based on our credit appraisal. So not all the AAA PSUs directly come to our investment universe.
Okay. Thanks, Pankaj. The next question is for you, Ajit. Where is India's economy headed amidst the COVID-19 pandemic? When do you think will the economy start improving, and which all sectors are likely to be most impacted?
So, as I indicated, that we got into COVID with a weakened economy. And we should also realize that the whole world was waiting for something to happen in the global environment. Since 2008, as has been shown by Chirag in his slides, you've had this printing of the corporate, of government paper, central banks printing money, governments issuing bonds, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what caused stock markets to recover. And in the Indian context, if you look at COVID, it was not COVID that's really hurt the economy. COVID is, of course, the straw that broke the camel's back. We have to go back in history to this chart and look at what the impact of demonetization was. Look at what the impact of the cow slaughter ban has been. Look at what the impact of GST has been. I've written articles on GST before, where I've said GST was a completely stupid policy that was crafted and drafted by the Congress government and sadly implemented by this government. GST was a bad idea in my view, and I'm happy to take separate questions on that or go and read stuff on that. And then on top of that, you had the crisis in the NBFC sector. You had the crisis in the real estate sector. Real estate companies in 2009 should have been allowed to go bankrupt, should have been allowed to go bust. What happened in 2008-9 is really startling, that all these real estate companies, or many of them, had borrowed from international banks. When the international banks were faced with the Lehman crisis, they took their money back home. And like the turn of a coin, all that money was replaced by local government borrowing, or rather from loans from State Bank of India and local banks. So mostly the PSUs and some of the NBFCs. So rather than clearing the real estate market, you actually allowed it to stumble along for the last 10 years. And that's eaten and drained away so much money. Loan after loan after loan has gone from NBFC and banks to survive these real estate developers. They had a choice, or they should have been forced to drop their prices so that people could buy the homes that they wish to live in. You would have kept the whole economy moving. Instead, with government help, and I'm sure there's a lot of connectivity in all of this, the PSU banks and the NBFCs kept these zombie real estate companies alive, were sitting with unsold property of 2-3 years inventory in major cities, and you've got this very weakened financial system. So when you hit with GST, when you're hit with demonetization, the financial system gets even worse. On top of that, RBI, rightfully so, has asked banks to recognize NPAs. So banks are busy recognizing NPAs. They're scared to give loans. And all of this ends up with the ILFS crisis. And budget making or budget announcements have done nothing to recognize this. I mean, this government has been completely clueless on how to fix the economy. It's just drifted from one quarter to the next, from one budget to the next. And finally, when you're hit with COVID, this is what happens. The government announces a national lockdown, and the only rescue package that's announced so far in terms of the economy, forget the financial markets and the bailout of the mutual fund industry of 50,000 crores that's going out right now. But besides that, there's been a 0.8% to GDP rescue by the government, 0.8%. And everyone's waiting for the government to do something. And I have no clue what they're thinking in Delhi, but it's sad they're doing nothing. And if they allow this problem to persist, it will damage the economy like pretty much beyond repair. A AAA company could start going bankrupt. We used the Equity Master database a few weeks ago of the 180 companies that I looked at on the database, and we just did a simple calculation. What is their liquid cash? What is their cash on hand? And what are their salaries and wages? And we found that not even 10% of those companies could survive for more than 6 months. Not even 10%. And that's only paying salaries and wages. Forget rent, forget repaying loan, forget interest costs. That's all extra. So if financial, if the balance sheets in India are so weak that they can't survive this black crow event or black swan event, so a company not being able to sell is a black swan event. The stock market being hit by redemptions is a black crow event. The stock market being hit by dislocations is a black crow event. And if our government is not able to help the black swans, but they're spending all their time with the mutual fund industry and the RBI is helping the black crows, shame on them. They should be helping the millions of people, the millions of migrants who are stuck across the country with massive handouts. I mean, to me, if you look at Australia, what did Australia do? Within a week of being hit by COVID, the Prime Minister went on national TV. He did not ask you to light a diya. He did not ask you to hit the thali. He did not send jet planes flying over your head. He sent 80% of your salary check to your bank account, a 15% to GDP rescue. 80% of your salary check is coming to your bank account. Look at the confidence that people in Australia can live, knowing that despite them sitting at home, even if their companies are in trouble, there's a check coming their way. That's what we need to do. We need to ensure that checks are going the way of the people, particularly the poor people, particularly those who don't have any options and are living day to day. So if the government gets that right, then we restore the economy. And effectively, this next 6-9 months is a write-off. So those who are looking at stock market investing, forget any kind of earnings per share, in my view, from companies for the next 6 months. Forget about it. You have to buy the recovery. You have to be a long-term investor. Stock markets could fall by 20, 30% from where they are today. They could go up by 10%. They could fall 10, 15. It doesn't matter. What you need to do is make sure you follow that simple formula. Keep money aside so you're safe for your expenses for maybe 12 months, maybe 18, because like everyone knows, a vaccine is supposed to come by June of next year. So that's 12 months away. So if we can live till then, fantastic. That's great. Don't have to worry about markets. Rest of the money, deploy into equities and keep in gold in the 80-20 ratio that I followed for myself, and look at your own, financial situation and plan it that way. So the recovery will, in my view, be weak, and the extent of the recovery will be a function of how much the government is willing to spend on helping us recover. I mean, the central government has announced a lockdown. The state governments are dealing with the migrant labor. State governments get their revenues from 4 sources. They get it from a share of the GST, which the government has not paid till, only paid as of November 2019, yet to pay the other money. And now there'll be no activity, so GST will come down. They get it from property transactions. There's nothing happening in property. They get it from the sale of alcohol, which, thankfully for most people, it's just open. So there's some alcohol revenue that the states can get. And they get it from the petroleum sales. You're not driving your car, you're not flying in a plane, so there's no petroleum sales, but the government, of course, has raised excise duty and sales duty on that recently. So state finances are in trouble, and they need the money because the migrant problem has been thrown on their head. Looking after the poor people in their states has been thrown on their head because the migrant laborers from Bombay are no longer remitting money back to people living in UP or Bihar or Karnataka or wherever they came from to look after their families. So it's a massive problem. It requires a huge effort by the government, not the 0.8%. It's a shame that we're not going towards the 8, 10, 12% bailouts, in my view.
Thanks, Ajit. The next and final question is for Chirag. When would one invest in a balanced fund when markets are higher or lower?
So balanced fund, if you see, as the name suggests, has to be balanced allocations. So if the fund manager is not comfortable with the valuations in equity markets, they would lower their equity allocations. And therefore, you need to leave it to the fund manager to decide. So whenever you want to invest in a balanced fund kind of brought up, you need to invest and leave the allocation call to the fund manager, and they will try to justify in what asset, how much they should be at that point in time. And therefore, but make sure when you invest in a balanced fund, it has to be balanced. It cannot be biased towards equities as an asset class, because then you're taking much more risk than what you are willing to take. And therefore, whenever you want to invest in a balanced fund, don't time it. Leave it to the fund manager to change allocations in a way that your downsides are protected and you get some portion of the upside when the market recovers. So there is no timing in a balanced fund, but you need to make sure they follow the principles that it is truly a balanced fund.
Chirag, one quick follow-up question. How old is the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund and what is its track record?
Yeah, so if you see, the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund was launched in July 2012. So it's been close to 8 years of existence. So if you see, since inception, the returns of the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund has been 8.7% per annum. And if you see the standard deviation risk that it has taken to achieve these returns is less than 6%.
But sorry, if I can just throw, we talk about risk, and Chirag mentioned it. So risk is measured financially, or kind of not financially, mathematically, statistically, by standard deviation and volatility. So all that standard deviation and volatility do is tell you, they kind of measure the up and down movement. They don't talk about risk. Risk is actually, as we discussed in many other funds, when you take risk of a company and you don't know whether that company is going to actually repay you or not. So you will only find out that risk when it hits you, or you expect it to hit you and you plan for it. So if you held, for example, if you have an investment in a fund that's meant to be a kind of a bond fund, and that bond fund has AAA paper, as opposed to, for example, Pankaj's Quantum Dynamic Bond Fund that has nothing, or take the case of the liquid fund. If a liquid fund has got AA paper or AAA paper because they can earn a certain higher rate of interest because it's more risky, and therefore they can show a better return to you, and you put all that money in that fund, and you ignore Pankaj's liquid fund because he has pure government paper and he's not borrowing to enhance his risk, and he's not taking any risk. So risk is now, what you're seeing today is risk. You're seeing risk unraveled. You're seeing the risk of a AAA paper turning into AA, of a AA paper moving to single A, of companies going into default. Risk is not a volatility. Risk is not standard deviation. Those are mathematical expressions to compare like for like. But when you compare the quantum liquid fund to another liquid fund, it's not like for like. You're being presented to very different animals. One has inherent risk in it, which you're experiencing today. And in Pankaj's Quantum Liquid Fund, the only risk you have is if the government of India goes bankrupt. The government of India goes bankrupt, then we're all in trouble in any case. So that's a risk we all have to live with, whether we like it or not, as long as you have some gold that Chirag spoke about before.
And just to add that in the Quantum Multi-Asset Fund, we do not take any credit risk. The debt portion lies, the bulk of it is in the Quantum Liquid Fund, which doesn't take any private credit, or in the Dynamic Bond Fund to some extent to take advantage of the interest rate cycles. And therefore, even that doesn't take any private credit risk. So we don't have any private credit risk as far as our debt exposure in the multi-asset fund goes.
Thanks, Chirag. We're now running out of time, so we'll be wrapping up the session. But before that, I request Ajit to give the concluding remarks.
So my concluding remarks are going to be a little different, actually. So, I'll talk a bit about the economy and then I'll conclude. So in the overall sense, I think the key thing to recognize that what we've tried to build and have built in Quantum since 2006, when we launched our first fund, is a fund house where you'll get what we tell you're going to get. If we talk about risk, we'll explain the risk. If we're taking some risk, we'll explain it. We recognize that investors should not be taking excessive risk, and we've literally built simple funds, simple solutions to take care of your needs. So please consider us as a riskless house in some sense. Performance. So there is integrity that you should take for granted, and you have to be competent. And I think we've shown competence across everything. Probably we've slipped a bit on the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund. So we'll explain that a bit later next week when we have the talk. So with this, you'll be able to, pick and choose what you wish to do. In terms of the economy and in terms of markets, I personally believe that stock markets could decline further because the bad news is not yet priced in, and we still haven't got a significant government intervention to stop the bleeding in the economy, to turn it around. I think the government is too focused on fiscal deficits, and I think that they should just let go, because every country in the world has to print money. Every country in the world has to do a bailout. So if every country does the 10%, for example, then everyone's the same. Some may do more, some may do less, and to that extent will suffer. And I think that India has to plan for a significant bailout. It has to be a 8, 10, 12% of GDP, like a massive firepower. And you may not spend all of it. You have to announce that I'm willing to do it. Even the willingness to do something could turn sentiment around and could turn negatives into neutral, into positive. In terms of, there was another question on this, on inflation and deflation. So clearly there is no demand for anything. So there will be deflation by and large, as prices are not going to increase. However, in the short term, if there are supply chain, if there are bottlenecks, take the case of masks. That's a question of gorging and price supply chain bottlenecks. So price of face masks have gone up a lot because they're in demand, right? So you'll find these little skewing in the economy where certain price of certain goods, of pharmaceutical products, antibiotics, painkillers, masks will start going up. Hospital beds, if you're not well, etc., will start going up because they're in short supply. And as the government spends more money, it's likely that the currency will take the hit, right? Something has to take the hit. So if at all, maybe the Indian currency, which in any case, even on a traditional REER, the real effective exchange rate of the rupee, is in any case 15% overvalued or 10% overvalued. So the currency could go from 76 to 85 or 76 to 90, somewhere there. If, as these things progress, we may find out. That would be, in my view, the outlook for India. But what I would urge, and I feel bad ending this, because normally when we have a physical path to path, when there was no physical distancing and social distancing, we would go on for hours. So sadly, we have to put this to an end for now, but we will come back with more of the path to profits. And for those questions that are not answered, we'll make sure we answer them online. But thank you again. Please be extremely careful of your health, of your household, and equally important, please be very, very careful of your financial health. That's, as you've realized, extremely important too. Please build buffers before you start looking for future gain and future capital. Make sure that your present is looked after. And I think the COVID has brought that home to all of us. Make sure you got safe money to pay your expenses so that you can be the beacon of light for your family, so that they can look up to you as someone who's solid, who's not nervous, and then you can address the problems that exist in the family in these very, very difficult times. So thank you, everyone, and God bless and prayers to all. Thank you. Thank you, Ghazal.
Thank you, Ajit, and thank you all for attending. We hope you found the session to be insightful and useful. Closing the session now.
मेरे गाँव की मिट्टी investments are subject to market risks, read all scheme related documents carefully.